Welcome to Prepper Nation. I'm John. Thank you very much for being here this morning, Prepper Nation. We're going to talk about boots on the ground this morning. It's being talked about in a lot of other communities as well because of a few statements that were made on Monday by France's president, which we're going to get into, but we're not going to gloom it and doom it. We're just going to go. I'm going to try and be as level-headed as possible about it and explain to people what is going on, although it is not good. Let me just say that. So we are seeing Z-Man's support over in Europe, excuse me, kind of splinter off into two different groups, okay? So the first group seems to be war at any cost whatsoever. These folks want war. They're not even trying to hide the fact anymore. The second group, and both of these are within NATO, the second group of countries seems to want to remain neutral no matter what. They don't want to enter the war red hot and, be, you know, an official belligerent in the war, if you will. So the French president, Macron, is floating the idea of putting boots on the ground, which is why we're hearing a lot about it all of a sudden in the community. He's pushing that idea to other NATO countries. Now he's saying the West, which would also include us, right? He's saying we need to go in at some point, boots on the ground. We give you two direct quotes. One is Western troops again, so that would include the United States, and of course, we're talking about against Russia. But this direct quote really does stand out, and this one is the one that raised the antenna for me. We will do anything we can to prevent Russia from winning this war. That's a very powerful statement because again, this dude is shot calling in France, and he is essentially saying France is part of the war at this point. And because France is involved in this war, he's directly tying them to the war, and he's saying other NATO countries need to join us. Other Western powers need to join us. He's speaking not only about France but also NATO powers will do anything we can to prevent Russia from winning this war. He doesn't say the war against Ukraine. He said this war, meaning they're directly involved at this point. Um, so that statement also raised an antenna for a different reason because it totally contradicts what we're being told in mainstream media here in the United States of America, at least. I check all the other mainstream media that I can get a hold of: Al Jazeera, Sky News, BBC. But for the most part, I'm seeing what you folks are seeing in mainstream media here in the United States, and we're going to go over that. If you don't mind, take a moment, hit like or subscribe to the channel and say, forget censorship, son. It does help the channel grow, and it is our channel. But anyway, mainstream media. I'm going to give you two quotes, and this is why it totally his statement contradicts what we're being told. Okay, so I saw this morning on a mainstream media channel on X. They had tweeted this out, and I actually replied to it at one Prepper Nation, the number one, and then Prepper Nation, if you're all on X. Um, Direct quote: the Russian Air Force has been getting decimated over the past 3 weeks. We're being told that. Okay. Is it accurate? I don't know. But again, as someone here in the United States, the Russian Air Force has been getting decimated over the past 3 weeks. Another direct quote: Ukraine needs Western aid to win the war after setbacks. And that is a direct quote from Z-Man himself. We need Western aid to win the war after setbacks. Well, if you're decimating Russia's Air Force, what setbacks? If you don't mind my asking. You see the problem here? Somebody's lying. Somebody's lying. Either Z-Man doesn't need the aid that he's asking for, or they are getting the brakes beat off of them by Putin and company, and mainstream media is lying to the people here in the United States about it. And I'm inclined to agree with the second one. I do think that we're losing this war. And the reason that I think Putin is winning the war is that statement. Getting back to the statement by Macron there for a second, he seems to be in panic mode, if you will, because it does look like the tide is starting to turn. And Z-Man and company have lost a lot of ground over the past week and a half. They've had to fall back, strategic fallback, whatever you want to call it. But that's the thing. The truth is always the first casualty of war, is it not? We're never told the truth completely. We're never told the truth after the fact. Y'all know this. History books are written by the victors, right? So the second group within NATO, again, the first group seems to be led by France and others. They're warmongering. They want to go in, boots on the ground. They can't get it started fast enough. But he keeps using the term Western troops, which would imply that we are going to at some point send boots on the ground. The second group, believe it or not, to their credit, is being led by Germany. Germany was at least largely responsible. I'm not going to put all the blame off on Germany for both world wars, but they were largely responsible for both, getting both going. And this time around, their chancellor seems to understand what's going on. And Z-Man has asked for Taurus missiles, which are German made. They're long range missiles. They're extremely effective. And the chancellor has said no. The German chancellor has said no. And the reason that he's saying no to this, he's saying it's not something that can be programmed remotely. This is not Ukrainians sitting in a bunker programming this. This would take German boots on the ground in Ukraine to program these. And he's saying, no, we're not going to put boots on the ground because that would drag us into essentially a world war that we don't want any part of. He's trying to remain neutral. And I'm going to give you a direct quote by the Chancellor of Germany. I'm surprised that some people are not concerned. This could lead to participation in war. So he's speaking to France. It seems like NATO is starting to fracture. I don't think they're going to split up over this war, but it seems like half of NATO is ready to go in, boomsticks ablazing, if you will, against Putin and company. And the other half of NATO countries are like, no, we really don't want to be caught up in another world war. Our economies are already a mess. We had our fill the first two times around. We really don't see, why we would be caught up in this. And the biggest, I don't know if you would call it a straw man or what, but the biggest thing being told right now by mainstream media is and Macron, the French president actually touched on this as well. If we don't stop them in Ukraine, they're going to keep on coming. And I'm not buying this. We'll get into it in a minute, but I'm not buying that line. I'm really not. Sweden is officially joining NATO. They have cleared all of the hurdles. Why is this significant, right? They've been wargaming and stuff with NATO anyway. Why is this significant? Well, remember back a few weeks ago when Putin sat down with Carlson and he did his little interview or whatever. And some people thought it was a great interview, some people thought it was lackluster, but whatever, I digress. The point is, the number one reason Putin gave during that interview for the invasion, the special military operation, as he still calls it to this day, is NATO expansion. You can pull up maps, folks. You've got the ability right now. Pull up maps. NATO expansion in Europe since 1991. Take a look at what NATO was and how many countries have joined. And what you will see, it looks almost like the strangulation of Russia. It looks like they're totally surrounding Russia at some point. And Putin, again, this was the number one keynote. He said, this is the reason we had to do what we had to do. We cannot have NATO on our borders. He goes on during that interview to say, we tried to join NATO. They said no. You may be scratching your head asking yourself, why would they have turned him down? If Russia is the number one threat and NATO is established, to defeat Russia and to keep Russia at bay, why would they not just absorb Russia and the threat be done? And the answer is, as I said a couple of weeks ago, there ain't no money in that, son. There's no money. If you eliminate the threat, you know what I'm saying? In order to have a horror movie and the budget for a horror movie, you got to have a bad guy. If Michael Myers joins in and all of a sudden he's a good guy, well, son, there ain't no more Halloween movies to be made. Therefore, there's no longer a need for NATO. There's no longer a need for the budget, if that makes sense. So, um, and this is just my 2 cents. Let me know what you think. But any country, I believe, has the right to be upset with this kind of expansion. And again, I've never been to Russia, but I'm sitting here in the United States and I'm thinking, whether it be Russia, whether it be China or whomever, North Korea, if they began to expand and they started to surround us at the northern and southern border, that would be a little worrisome. I mean, we saw this with the missile crisis and stuff. The United States did not like the fact that we were beginning to see enemies near our border, right? So he's saying the same thing. And I think any country would have the right to be upset about it, specifically when they have petitioned time and again, please do not expand anymore. Please. They've been promised there would be no more expansion, and NATO continues to spit in their face. NATO has had 21 military operations since the Second World War. So this is not a group that avoids war. This is a group that warmongers. You do not want them at your front door, right? You don't. And this is why we're continuing to see the escalation in Russia. But getting back to Macron's point, and I'm hearing this a lot in mainstream media. I'm hearing this from, to be honest with you, from Congress on both sides of the aisle, because you got warmongers on the left, but then you got your Lindsey Grahams and your Nikki Haley's, these warmongers as well. We must blindly send our nation's wealth and service members to Europe. Otherwise, what? Otherwise, what? Putin's army is just going to charge the hills of Tennessee at some point? I mean, seriously? Is this the sales pitch? Empty out all of the war chests that we have, mail it all off to Europe, potentially send our servicemen and women to Europe, get entangled in a World War III situation in order to avoid Putin's army from charging West Virginia and Tennessee and Kentucky and New York. Like, that's not going to happen. He doesn't have any interest over here. You know what I mean? It's just such a dumb sales pitch that I can't believe people are behind that they are willing to just clear out what little wealth that our country has left and send our young people over into a meat grinder. People are ready to do that. They're ready to sit here in the United States and point somebody else. Lindsey Graham's not going to fight. His family's not going to fight, but he's ready to send somebody else's family to go and fight. And again, why? It's not like they're not in North America. It's not like they're an immediate threat to the United States. Let Europe handle Europe is all I'm saying. But we can't do that because NATO, I guess. Unfortunately, and again, I'm not trying to gloom and doom or anything like that. I know there's too much of that in the community already, but unfortunately, I agree with a lot of the videos that have kicked out this week in the prepping community. This probably does end with boots on the ground in Europe at some point. Right now, this is a proxy war, but I think we're starting to see the closing stages of the proxy war. I think NATO has figured out Putin's not going to win this, not going to lose this proxy war, excuse me. And so NATO now, what are they going to do? Are they just going to let him continue to take chunks of Ukraine? Or are they going to swoop in with boots on the ground? And again, I think this does end with NATO boots on the ground, Western boots on the ground, meaning United States service members as well. It shouldn't. I'm not saying I agree with it. It should not. It definitely should not, but I think that it will. And I'll leave you with this question, and you can answer it if you want to. Think about the war in Ukraine, the proxy war that is getting ready to, I believe, turn into something much worse than a proxy war. Who stands to gain from it? Think about that. Put all the biases, hang them up on the hat rack for a second, son. Who stands to gain? Who stands to profit? What do we gain exactly by being in Europe? What does the average American citizen gain by being in Europe? And really, the only sales pitch that you're going to hear is, well, they won't invade Tennessee. They won't invade Florida if we stop them in Europe. Like, that's ludicrous, man. That's just idiotic, right? The people that stand to gain are the people that own money in the military complex. Cut and dry. That's who stands to gain and profit. Same story it's always been, I guess. Y'all take care and God bless.